John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, Chapter 1. To the red country and part of the gray country of Oklahoma, the last rains came gently, and they did not cut the scarred earth. The plows crossed and recrossed the rivulet marks. The last rains lifted the corn quickly and scattered weed colonies and grass along the sides of the roads, so that the gray country and the dark red country began to disappear under a green cover. In the last part of May the sky grew pale, and the clouds that had hung in high puffs for so long in the spring were dissipated. The sun flared down on the growing corn day after day until a line of brown spread along the edge of each green bayonet. The clouds appeared and went away, and in a while they did not try any more. The weeds grew darker green to protect themselves, and they did not spread any more. The surface of the earth crusted a thin, hard crust, and as the sky became pale, so the earth became pale, pink in the red country and white in the gray country. In the water-cut gullies, the earth dusted down in dry little streams. Gophers and antlions started small avalanches, and as the sharp sun struck day after day, the leaves of the young corn became less stiff and erect. They bent in a curve at first, and then, as the central ribs of strength grew weak, each leaf tilted downward. Then it was June, and the sun shone more fiercely. The brown lines on the corn leaves widened and moved in on the central ribs. The weeds frayed and edged back towards their roots. The air was thin and the sky more pale, and every day the earth paled. In the roads, where the teams moved, where the wheels milled the ground, and the hoofs of the horses beat the ground, the dirt crust broke, and the dust formed. Every moving thing lifted the dust into the air. A walking man lifted a thin layer as high as his waist, and a wagon lifted the dust as high as the fence tops. And an automobile boiled a cloud behind it. The dust was long in settling back again. When June was half gone, the big clouds moved up out of Texas and the Gulf, high, heavy clouds, rain heads. The men in the fields looked up at the clouds and sniffed at them and held wet fingers up to sense the wind. And the horses were nervous while the clouds were up. The rain heads dropped a little, spattering, and hurried on to some other country. Behind them the sky was pale again, and the sun flared. In the dust there were drop craters, where the rain had fallen, and there were clean splashes on the corn, and that was all. A gentle wind followed the rain clouds, driving them on northward, a wind that softly clashed the drying corn. A day went by, and the wind increased, steady, unbroken by gusts. The dust from the roads fluffed up and spread out, and fell on the weeds beside the fields, and fell into the fields a little way. Now the wind grew strong and hard, and it worked at the rain crust in the cornfields. Little by little the sky was darkened by the mixing dust, and the wind felt over the earth, loosened the dust, and carried it away. The wind grew stronger. The rain crust broke, and the dust lifted up out of the fields and drove gray plumes into the air like sluggish smoke. The corn threshed the wind and made a dry, rushing sound. The finest dust did not settle back to earth now, but disappeared into the darkening sky. The wind grew stronger, whisked Under stones carried up straws and old leaves, and even little clods, marking its course as it sailed across the fields. The air and the sky darkened, and through them the sun shone redly, and there was a raw sting in the air. During a night, the wind raced faster over the land, dug cunningly among the rootless of the corn, and the corn fought the wind with its weakened leaves until the roots were freed by the prying wind, and then each stalk settled wearily sideways toward the earth and pointed the direction of the wind. The dawn came, but no day. In the gray sky a red sun appeared, a dim red circle that gave a little light, like a dusk. And as the day advanced, the dusk slipped back toward darkness, and the wind cried and whimpered over the fallen corn. Men and women huddled in their houses, and they tied handkerchiefs over their noses when they went out, and wore goggles to protect their eyes. When the night came again, it was black night, for the stars could not pierce the dust to get down, and the window lights could not even spread beyond their own yards. Now the dust was evenly mixed with the air, an emulsion of dust and air. Houses were shut tight and cloth wedged around doors and windows, but the dust came in so thinly that it could not be seen in the air, and it settled like pollen on the chairs and tables, on the dishes. The people brushed it from their shoulders. Little lines of dust lay at the door sills. In the middle of that night the wind passed on and left the land quiet. The dust-filled air muffled sound more completely than fog does. The people lying in their beds heard the wind stop. They awakened when the rushing wind was gone. They lay quietly and listened deep into the stillness. Then the roosters crowed, and their voices were muffled, and the people stirred restlessly in their beds and wanted the morning. They knew it would take a long time for the dust to settle out of the air. In the morning the dust hung like fog, and the sun was as red as ripe new blood. All day the dust sifted down from the sky, and the next day it sifted down. An even blanket covered the earth. It settled on the corn, piled up on the tops of the fence posts, piled up on the wires. It settled on roofs, blanketed the weeds and trees. The people came out of their houses and smelled the hot, stinging air and covered their noses from it. And the children came out of the houses, but they did not run or shout, as they would have done after a rain. Men stood by their fences and looked at the ruined corn, drying fast now, only a little green showing through the film of dust. The men were silent, and they did not move often. And the women came out of the houses to stand beside their men, to feel whether this time the men would break. The women studied the men's faces secretly, for the corn could go as long as something else remained. The children stood nearby, drawing figures in the dust with bare toes, and the children sent exploring senses out to see whether men and women would break. The children peeked at the faces of the men and women, and then drew careful lines in the dust with their toes. Horses came to the watering throes, and nuzzled the water to clear the surface dust. After a while the faces of the watching men lost their bemused perplexity and became hard and angry and resistant. Then the women knew that they were safe and that there was no break. Then they asked, "What'll we do?" And the men replied, "I don't know." But it was all right. The women knew it was all right, and the watching children knew it was all right. Women and children knew deep in themselves that no misfortune was too great to bear if their men were whole. The women went into the house to their work, and the children began to play, but cautiously at first. As the day went forward, the sun became less red. It flared down on the dust-blanketed land. The men sat in the doorways of their houses. Their hands were busy with sticks and little rocks. The men sat still, thinking, figuring. Chapter 2. A huge red transport truck stood in front of the little roadside restaurant. The vertical exhaust pipe muttered softly, and an almost invisible haze of steel blue smoke hovered over its end. It was a new truck, shining red, and in 12-inch letters on its sides, Oklahoma City Transport Company. Its double tires were new, and a brass padlock stood straight out from the hasp on the big back doors. Inside the screened restaurant, a radio played, quiet dance music turned low the way it is when no one is listening. A small outlet fan turned silently in its circular hole over the entrance, and flies buzzed excitedly about the doors and windows, abutting the screens. Inside, one man, the truck driver, sat on a stool and rested his elbows on the counter and looked over his coffee at the lean and lonely waitress. He talked the smart, listless language of the roadsides to her. "I seen him about 3 months ago. He had an operation. Cut something out. I forget what. And she? Doesn't seem no longer ago than a week I seen him myself. Looked fine then. He's a nice sort of guy, when he ain't stinko." Now then the flies whirred softly at the screen door. The coffee machine spurted steam, and the waitress, without looking, reached behind her and shut it off. Outside, a man walking along the edge of the highway crossed over and approached the truck. He walked slowly to the front of it, put his hand on the shiny fender, and looked at the "No Riders" sticker on the windshield. For a moment, he was about to walk on down the road, but instead he sat on the running board on the side away from the restaurant. He was not over 30. His eyes were very dark brown, and there was a hint of brown pigment in his eyeballs. His cheekbones were high and wide, and strong, deep lines cut down his cheeks in curves beside his mouth. His upper lip was long, and since his teeth protruded, the lips stretched to cover them, for this man kept his lips closed. His hands were hard, with broad fingers and nails as thick and rigid as little clamshells. The space between thumb and forefinger and the hams of his hands were shiny with callus. The man's clothes were new, all of them, cheap and new. His gray cap was so new that the visor was still stiff, and the buttons still on, and not shapeless and bulged as it would be when it had served for a while all the various purposes of a cap-carrying sack, towel, handkerchief. His suit was of a cheap gray hard cloth, and so new that there was creases in the trousers. His blue chambray shirt was stiff and smooth with filler. The coat was too big, the trousers too short, for he was a tall man. The coat shoulder peaks hung down on his arms, and even then the sleeves were too short, and the front of the coat flapped loosely over his stomach. He wore a pair of new tan shoes, of the kind called army last, hobnailed, and with half circles like horseshoes to protect the edges of the heels from wear. This man sat on the running board and took off his cap and mopped his face with it. Then he put on the cap, and by pulling, started the future ruin of the visor. His feet caught his attention. He leaned down and loosened the shoelaces, and did not tie the ends again. Over his head, the exhaust of the diesel engine whispered in quick puffs of blue smoke. The music stopped in the restaurant, and a man's voice spoke from the loudspeaker, but the waitress did not turn him off, for she didn't know the music had stopped. Her exploring fingers had found a lump under her ear. She was trying to see it in a mirror behind the counter without letting the truck driver know, and so she pretended to push a bit of hair to neatness. The truck driver said, "There was a big dance in Shawnee. I heard somebody got killed or something. You hear anything?" "No," said the waitress, and she lovingly fingered the lump under her ear. Outside, the seated man stood up and looked over the cowl of the truck and watched the restaurant for a moment. Then he settled back on the running board, pulled a sack of tobacco and a book of papers from his side pocket. He rolled his cigarette slowly and perfectly, studied it, smoothed it. At last he lighted it and pushed the burning match into the dust at his feet. The sun cut into the shade of the truck as noon approached. In the restaurant, the truck driver paid his bill and put his 2 nickels change in a slot machine. The whirling cylinders gave him no score. "They fix 'em so you can't win nothing," he said to the waitress. And she replied, "The guy took the jackpot not 2 hours ago. $3.80 he got. How soon you gonna be back by?" He held the screen door a little open. "Week, 10 days, he said. "Got to make a run to Tulsa, and I never get back as soon as I think." She said crossly, "Don't let the flies in. Either go out or come in." "So long," he said, and pushed his way out. The screen door banged behind him. He stood in the sun, peeling the wrapper from a piece of gum. He was a heavy man, broad in the shoulders, thick in the stomach. His face was red, and his blue eyes long and slitted from having squinted always at sharp light. He wore army trousers and high-laced boots. Holding the stick of gum in front of his lips, he called through the screen, "Well, don't do nothing you don't want me to hear about." The waitress was turned toward a mirror on the back wall. She grunted a reply. The truck driver gnawed down the stick of gum slowly, opening his jaws and lips wide with each bite. He shaped the gum in his mouth, rolled it under his tongue, while he walked to the big red truck. The hitchhiker stood up and looked across through the windows. "Could you give me a lift, mister?" The driver looked quickly back at the restaurant for a second. "Didn't you see the no rider sticker on the windshield?" "Sure, I seen it. But sometimes a guy'll be a good guy even if some rich bastard makes him carry a sticker." The driver, getting slowly into the truck, considered the parts of this answer. If he refused now, Not only was he not a good guy, but he was forced to carry a sticker, was not allowed to have company. If he took in the hitchhiker, he was automatically a good guy, and also he was not one whom any rich bastard could kick around. He knew he was being trapped, but he couldn't see a way out. And he wanted to be a good guy. He glanced again at the restaurant. "Scrunch down on the running board till we get around the bend," he said. The hitchhiker flopped down out of sight and clung to the door handle. The motor roared up for a moment, the gears clicked in, and the great truck moved away. First gear, second gear, third gear, and then a high whining pickup and fourth gear. Under the clinging man, the highway blurred dizzily by. It was a mile to the first turn in the road, then the truck slowed down. The hitchhiker stood up, eased the door open, and slipped into the seat. The driver looked over at him, slitting his eyes, and he chewed as though thoughts and impressions were being sorted and arranged by his jaws before they were finally filed away in his brain. His eyes began at the new cap, moved down the new clothes to the new shoes. The hitchhiker squirmed his back against the seat in comfort, took off his cap, and swabbed his sweating forehead and chin with it. "Thanks, buddy," he said. "My dogs was pooped out." "New shoes," said the driver. His voice had the same quality of secrecy and insinuation his eyes had. "You oughtn't to take no walk in new shoes. Hot weather." The hiker looked down at the dusty yellow shoes. "Didn't have no other shoes," he said. "Guy got to wear 'em if he got no others." The driver squinted judiciously ahead and built up the speed of the truck a little. "Going far?" "I'd have walked here if my dogs wasn't pooped out." The questions of the driver had the tone of a subtle examination. He seemed to spread nets, to set traps with his questions. "Looking for a job?" he asked. "No, my old man got a place 40 acres. He's a cropper, but we been there a long time." The driver looked significantly at the fields along the road where the corn was fallen sideways and the dust was piled on it. Little flints shoved through the dusty soil. The driver said, as though to himself, "A 40-acre cropper, and he ain't been dusted out, and he ain't been tractored out." "Course I ain't heard lately," said the hitchhiker. "Long time," said the driver. A bee flew into the cab and buzzed in back of the windshield. The driver put out his hand and carefully drove the bee into the air stream that blew it out of the window. "Cropper's going fast now," he said. "One cat takes and shoves 10 families out. Cats all over hell now. Tear in and shove the croppers out. How's your old man hold on?" His tongue and his jaws became busy with the neglected gum, turned it and chewed it. With each opening of his mouth, his tongue could be seen flipping the gun over it. "Well, I ain't heard lately. I never was no hand to write. Nor my old man, either," he added quickly. "But the both of us can if we want." "Been doing a job?" Again the secret investigating casualness. He looked out over the fields at the shimmering air, and gathering his gum into his cheek, out of the way he spat out the window. "Sure have," said the hitchhiker. "Thought so. I seen your hands. Been swinging a pick or an axe or a sledge. That shines up your hands. I notice all stuff like that. Take a pride in it." The hitchhiker stared at him. The truck tires sang on the road. Like to know anything else? I'll tell you. You ain't got to guess. Now don't get sore. I wasn't getting nosy. I'll tell you anything. I ain't hiding nothing. Now don't get sore. I just like to notice things. Makes the time pass. I'll tell you anything. Name's Jode. Tom Jode. Old man is Old Tom Jode. His eyes rested broodingly on the driver. Don't get sore. I didn't mean nothing. I don't mean nothing neither, said Jode. I'm just trying to get along without shoving nobody around. He stopped and looked out at the dry fields, at the starved tree clumps hanging uneasily in the heated distance. From his side pocket, he brought out his tobacco and papers. He rolled his cigarette down between his knees where the wind could not get at it. The driver chewed as rhythmically, as thoughtfully as a cow. He waited to let the whole emphasis of the preceding passage disappear and be forgotten. At last, when the air seemed neutral again, he said, "A guy that never been a truck skinner don't know nothing what it's like. Owners don't want us to pick up nobody, so we got to set here and just skin her along, lest we want to take a chance of getting fired like I just done with you." "Appreciate it," said Jode. "I've knew guys that done screwy things while they're driving trucks. I remember a guy used to make up poetry. It passed the time." He looked over secretly to see whether Jode was interested or amazed. Jode was silent, looking into the distance ahead, along the road, along the white road that waved gently like a ground swell. The driver went on at last. "I remember a piece of poetry this here guy wrote down. It was about him and a couple other guys going all over the world drinking and raising hell and screwing around. I wished I could remember how that piece went. This guy had words in it that Jesus H. Christ wouldn't know what they meant. Part was like this. And there we spied a nigger with a trigger, and was bigger than an elephant's proboscis, or the wanger of a whale. That proboscis is a nose like. With an elephant, it's his trunk. Guy showed me in a dictionary. Carried that dictionary all over hell with him. He'd look in it while he's pulled up getting his pie and coffee." He stopped feeling lonely in the long speech. His secret eyes turned on his passenger. Jode remained silent. Nervously, the driver tried to force him into participation. "Ever know a guy that said big words like that?" "Preacher," said Jode. "Well, it makes you mad to hear a guy use big words. Course, with a preacher, it's all right because nobody would fool around with a preacher anyway. But this guy was funny. You didn't give a damn when he said a big word, 'cause he just done it for ducks. He was putting on no dog." The driver was reassured. He knew at least that Jode was listening. He swung the great truck viciously around a bend, and the tires shrilled. "Like I was saying," he continued, "guy that drives a truck does screwy things. He got to. He'd go nuts just sitting here on the road sneaking under the wheels. Fellas says once that truck Skinner's eats all the time in hamburger joints along the road." "Sure seem to live there," Jode agreed. "Sure they stop, but it ain't to eat. They ain't hardly ever hungry. They're just goddamn sick of going. Get sick of it. Joints is the only place you can pull up, and when you stop, you got to buy something. so you can sling the bowl with the broad behind the counter. So you get a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. Kind of gives a guy a little rest. He chewed his gum slowly and turned it with his tongue. Must be tough, said Jode with no emphasis. The driver glanced quickly at him, looking for satire. Well, it ain't no goddamn cinch, she said testily. Looks easy just sitting here till you put in your 8 or maybe your 10 or your 14 hours. But the road gets into a guy. He's got to do something. Some sings and some whistles. Company won't let us have no radio. A few takes a pint along, and them kind don't stick long. He said the last smuggling. I don't never take a drink till I'm through. Yeah? Jode asked. Yeah. A guy got to get ahead. Why, I'm thinking of taking one of them correspondence school courses. Mechanical engineering. It's easy. Just study a few easy lessons at home. I'm thinking of it. Then I won't drive no truck. Then I'll tell other guys to drive trucks. Joe took a pint of whiskey from his side coat pocket. Sure you won't have a snort? His voice was teasing. No, by God. I won't touch it. A guy can't drink liquor all the time and study like I'm going to do. Joe uncorked the bottle, took 2 quick swallows, recorked it, and put it back in his pocket. The spicy, hot smell of the whiskey filled the cab. You're all wound up, said Jode. What's the matter? Got a girl? Well, sure. But I want to get ahead anyway. I've been training my mind for a hell of a long time. The whiskey seemed to loosen Jode up. He rolled another cigarette and lighted it. I ain't got a hell of a lot further to go, he said. The driver went on quickly. I don't need no shot, he said. I train my mind all of the time. I took a course in that 2 years ago. He patted the steering wheel with his right hand. Suppose I pass a guy on the road. I look at him, and after I'm past, I try to remember everything about him. Kind of clothes and shoes and hat and how he walked and maybe how tall and what weight and any scars. I do it pretty good. I can just make a whole picture in my head. Sometimes I think I ought to take a course to be a fingerprint expert. You'd be surprised how much a guy can remember. Joe took a quick drink from the flask. He dragged the last smoke from his raveling cigarette, and then, with calloused thumb and forefinger, crushed out the glowing end. He rubbed the butt to a pulp and put it out the window, letting the breeze suck it from his fingers. The big tires sang a high note on the pavement. Jode's dark white eyes became amused as he stared along the road. The driver waited and glanced uneasily over. At last, Jode's long upper lip grinned up from his teeth, and he chuckled silently. His chest jerked with the chuckles. You sure took a hell of a long time to get to it, buddy. The driver did not look over. Get to what? How do you mean? Jode's lips stretched tight over his long teeth for a moment, and he licked his lips like a dog, 2 licks, one in each direction from the middle. His voice became harsh. You know what I mean. You give me a going over when I first got in. I seen you. The driver looked straight ahead, gripped the wheel so tightly that the pads of his palms bulged and the backs of his hands paled. Jode continued. You know where I come from. The driver was silent. Don't you? Jode insisted. Well, sure. That is, maybe. But it ain't none of my business. I mind my own yard. It ain't nothing to me." The words tumbled out now. "I don't stick my nose in nobody's business." And suddenly he was silent and waiting, and his hands were still white on the wheel. A grasshopper flipped through the window and lighted on top of the instrument panel, where it sat and began to scrape its wings with its angled jumping legs. Jode reached forward and crushed its hard skull-like head with his fingers, and let it into the wind stream out the window. Jode chuckled again, while he brushed the bits of broken insect from his fingertips. "You got me wrong, mister," he said. "I ain't keeping quiet about it. Sure, I've been in McAllister. Been there 4 years. Sure, these is the clothes they give me when I come out. I don't give a damn who knows it. And I'm going to my old man's place so I don't have to lie to get a job." The driver said, "Well, that ain't none of my business. I ain't a nosy guy." "The hell you ain't," said Joe. "That big old nose of yours been sticking out 8 miles ahead of your face. You had that big nose going over me like a sheep in a vegetable patch." The driver's face tightened. "You got me all wrong," he began weakly. Jode laughed at him. "You being a good guy, you give me a lift. Well, hell, I done time, so what? You want to know what I done time for, don't you?" "That ain't none of my affair." "Nothing ain't none of your affair except skinning this here bold bitch along, and that's the last and least thing you work at. Now look. See that road up ahead?" "Yeah." "Well, I get off there. Sure, I know you're wetting your pants to know what I done. I ain't a guy to let you down." The high hum of the motor dulled, and the song of the tires dropped in pitch. Jode got out his pint and took another short drink. The truck drifted to a stop where a dirt road opened at right angles to the highway. Jode got out and stood beside the cab window. The vertical exhaust pipe puttered up its barely visible blue smoke. Jode leaned toward the driver. "Homicide," he said quickly. "That's a big word, means I killed a guy. 7 years. I'm sprung in 4 for keeping my nose clean." The driver's eyes slipped over Jode's face to memorize it. "I never asked you nothing about it," he said. "I mind my own yard. You can tell about it in every joint from here to Texola." He smiled. "So long, fella. You been a good guy. But look, when you been in stir a little while, you can smell a question coming from hell to breakfast. You telegraphed yours the first time you opened your trap." He spatted the metal door with the palm of his hand. "Thanks for the lift," he said. "So long." He turned away and walked into the dirt road. For a moment the driver stared after him, and then he called, "Luck!" Jode waved his hand without looking around. Then the motor roared up, and the gears clicked, and the great red truck rolled heavily away. Chapter 3. The concrete highway was edged with a mat of tangled, broken, dry grass, and the grass heads were heavy with oat beards to catch on a dog's coat, and foxtails to tangle in a horse's fetlocks, and clover burrs to fasten in sheep's wool. Sleeping life waiting to be spread and dispersed, every seed armed with an appliance of dispersal, twisting darts and parachutes for the wind, little spears and balls of tiny thorns, and all waiting for animals and for the wind, for a man's trousers cuff or the hem of a woman's skirt, all passive but armed with appliances of activity, still but each possessed of the and ledge of movement. The sun lay on the grass and warmed it, and in the shade under the grass the insects moved, ants and ant lions to set traps for them, grasshoppers to jump into the air and flick their yellow wings for a second, sow bugs like little armadillos plodding restlessly on many tender feet. And over the grass at the roadside a land turtle crawled turning aside for nothing, dragging his high dome shell over the grass. His hard legs and yellow-nailed feet threshed slowly through the grass, not really walking, but boosting and dragging his shell along. The barley beards slid off his shell, and the clover burrs fell on him and rolled to the ground. His horny beak was partly open, and his fierce, humorous eyes, under brows like fingernails, stared straight ahead. He came over the grass, leaving a beaten trail behind him, and the hill, which was the highway embankment, reared up ahead of him. For a moment he stopped, his head held high. He blinked and looked up and down. At last he started to climb the embankment. Front clawed feet reached forward but did not touch. The hind feet kicked his shell along, and it scraped on the grass and on the gravel. As the embankment grew steeper and steeper, the more frantic were the efforts of the land turtle. Pushing hind legs strained and slipped, boosting the shell along, and the horny head protruded as far as the neck could stretch. Little by little the shell slid up the embankment until at last a parapet cut straight across its line of march, the shoulder of the road, a concrete wall 4 inches high. As though they worked independently, the hind legs pushed the shell against the wall. The head upraised and peered over the wall to the broad, smooth plain of cement. Now the hands braced on top of the wall, strained and lifted, and the shell came slowly up and rested its front end on the wall. For a moment the turtle rested. A red ant ran into the shell, into the soft skin inside the shell, and suddenly the head and legs snapped in, and the armored tail clamped in sideways. The red ant was crushed between body and legs, and one head of wild oats was clamped into the shell by a front leg. For a long moment the turtle lay still, and then the neck crept out, and the old humorous, frowning eyes looked about, and the legs and tail came out. The back legs went to work, straining like elephant legs, and the shell tipped to an angle so that the front legs could not reach the level cement plain. But higher and higher the hind legs boosted it, until at last the center of balance was reached. The front tipped down, the front legs scratched the pavement, and it was up. But the head of wild oats was held by its stem around the front legs. Now the going was easy, and all the legs worked, and the shell boosted along, waggling from side to side. A sedan driven by a 40-year-old woman approached. She saw the turtle and swung to the right off the highway. The wheels screamed and a cloud of dust boiled up. 2 wheels lifted for a moment and then settled. The car skidded back onto the road and went on, but more slowly. The turtle had jerked into its shell, but now it hurried on, for the highway was burning hot. And now a light truck approached, and as it came near, the driver saw the turtle and swerved to hit it. His front wheel struck the edge of the shell, flipped the turtle like a tiddlywink, spun it like a coin, and rolled it off the highway. The truck went back to its course along the right side, lying on its back. The turtle was tight in its shell for a long time. But at last its legs waved in the air, reaching for something to pull it over. its front foot caught a piece of quartz, and little by little the shell pulled over and flopped upright. The wild oat head fell out, and 3 of the spearhead seeds stuck in the ground. And as the turtle crawled on down the embankment, its shell dragged dirt over the seeds. The turtle entered a dust road and jerked itself along, drawing a wavy, shallow trench in the dust with its shell. The old humorous eye looked ahead, and the horny beak opened a little. His yellow toenails slipped a fraction in the dust. Chapter 4. When Joe heard the truck get underway, gear climbing up to gear and the ground throbbing under the rubber beating of the tires, he stopped and turned about and watched it until it disappeared. When it was out of sight, he still watched the distance and the blue air shimmer. Thoughtfully, he took the pint from his jacket, unscrewed the metal cap, and sipped the whiskey delicately, running his tongue inside the bottleneck and then around his lips to gather in any flavor that might have escaped him. He said experimentally, "There we spied a nigger." And that was all he could remember. At last he turned about and faced the dusty road that cut off at right angles through the fields. The sun was hot, and no wind stirred the sifted dust. The road was cut with furrows where dust had slid and settled back into the wheel tracks. Joe took a few steps, and the flour-like dust spurted up in front of his new yellow shoes, and the yellowness was disappearing under gray dust. He leaned down and untied the laces, slipped off first one shoe and then the other, and he worked his damp feet comfortably in the hot, dry dust until little spurts of it came up between his toes, and until the skin on his feet tightened with dryness. He took off his coat and wrapped his shoes in it, and slipped the bundle under his arm. And at last he moved up the road, shooting the dust ahead of him, making a cloud that hung low to the ground behind him. The right-of-way was fenced, 2 strands of barbed wire on willow poles. The poles were crooked and badly trimmed. Whenever a crotch came to the proper height, the wire lay in it, and where there was no crotch, the barbed wire was lashed to the post with rusty baling wire. Beyond the fence, the corn lay beaten down by wind and heat and drought, and the cups, where leaf-joined stalk, were filled with dust. Joe plowed it along, dragging his cloud of dust behind him. A little bit ahead, he saw the high dome shell of the land turtle, crawling slowly along through the dust, its legs working stiffly and jerkily. Joe stopped to watch it, and his shadow fell on the turtle. Instantly, head and legs were withdrawn, and the short, thick tail clamped sideways into the shell. Joe picked it up and turned it over. The back was brown-gray, and the dust, but the underside of the shell was creamy yellow, clean and smooth. Joe shifted his bundle high under his arm and stroked the smooth undershell with his finger, and he pressed it. It was softer than the back. The hard old head came out and tried to look at the pressing finger, and the legs waved wildly. The turtle wetted on Joe's hand and struggled uselessly in the air. Joe turned it back upright and rolled it up in his coat with his shoes. He could feel it pressing and struggling and fussing under his arm. He moved ahead more quickly now, dragging his heels a little in the fine dust. Ahead of him, beside the road, a scrawny, dusty willow tree cast a speckled shade. Joe could see it ahead of him, its poor branches curving over the way, its load of leaves tattered and scraggly as a molting chicken. Jode was sweating now. His blue shirt darkened down his back and under his arms. He pulled at the visor of his cap and creased it in the middle, breaking its cardboard lining so completely that it could never look new again. And his steps took on new speed and intent toward the shade of the distant willow tree. At the willow, he knew there would be shade, at least one hard bar of absolute shade, thrown by the trunk since the sun had passed its zenith. The sun whipped the back of his neck now and made a little humming in his head. He could not see the base of the tree, for it grew out of a little swale that held water longer than the level places. Jode speeded his pace against the sun, and he started down the declivity. He slowed cautiously, for the bar of absolute shade was taken. A man sat on the ground, leaning against the trunk of the tree. His legs were crossed, and one bare foot extended nearly as high as his head. He did not hear Jode approaching, for he was whistling solemnly the tune of "Yes, sir, that's my baby." His extended foot swung slowly up and down in the tempo. It was not dance tempo. He stopped whistling and sang in an easy, thin tenor. "Yes, sir, that's my Savior. Jesus is my Savior. Jesus is my Savior now. On the levels, not the devil. Jesus is my Savior now." Jode had moved into the imperfect shade of the molting leaves before the man heard him coming, stopped his song, and turned his head. It was a long head, bony, tight of skin, and set on a neck as stringy and muscular as a celery stalk. His eyeballs were heavy and protruding, the lids stretched to cover them, and the lids were raw and red. His cheeks were brown and shiny and hairless, and his mouth full, humorous, or sensual. The nose, beaked and hard, stretched the skin so tightly that the bridge showed white. There was no perspiration on the face, not even on the tall, pale forehead. It was an abnormally high forehead, aligned with delicate blue veins at the temples. Fully half of the face was above the eyes. His stiff gray hair was mussed back from his brow, as though he had combed it back with his fingers. For clothes he wore overalls and a blue shirt. A denim coat with brass buttons and a spotted brown hat, creased like a pork pie, lay on the ground beside him. Canvas sneakers, gray with dust, lay near by where they had fallen when they were kicked off. The light seemed to go far into his brown eyes, and it picked out little golden specks deep in the irises. For clothes he wore overalls, lay near by where they had fallen when they were kicked off. The man looked long at Jode. The light seemed to go far into his brown eyes, and it picked out little golden specks deep in the irises. The strained bundle of neck muscles stood out. Jode stood still in the speckled shade. He took off his cap and mopped his wet face with it and dropped it and his rolled coat on the ground. The man, in the absolute shade, uncrossed his legs and dug with his toes at the earth. Jode said, "Hi, it's hotter than hell on the road." The seated man stared questioningly at him. "Now ain't you young Tom Jode? Old Tom's boy?" "Yep," said Jode. "All the way. Going home now." "You wouldn't remember me, I guess," the man said. He smiled, and his full lips revealed great horse teeth. "Oh, no, you wouldn't remember. You was always too busy pulling little girls' pigtails when I give you the Holy Spirit. You was all wropped up in yanking that pigtail out by the roots. You maybe don't recollect, but I do. The two of you come to Jesus at once because of that pigtail yanking, baptized both of you in the irrigation ditch at once, fighting and yelling like a couple of cats. Jode looked at him with drooped eyes, and then he laughed. Why, you're the preacher. You're the preacher. I just passed a recollection about you to a guy not an hour ago. I was a preacher, said the man seriously. Reverend Jim Casey was the burning busher. Used to howl out the name of Jesus to glory. And used to get an irrigation ditch so squirming full of repented sinners, half of 'em like to drownded. But not no more, he sighed. Just Jim Casey now. Ain't got the call no more. Got a lot of sinful ideas, but they seem kind of sensible. Jode said, You're bound to get ideas if you go thinking about stuff. Sure, I remember you. You used to give a good meeting. I recollect one time you give a whole sermon walking around on your hands, yelling your head off. Ma favored you more than anybody, and Grandma says you was just lousy with the Spirit. Joe dug at his rolled coat and found the pocket and brought out his pine. The turtle moved a leg, but he wrapped it up tightly. He unscrewed the cap and held out the bottle. Have a little snort? Casey took the bottle and regarded it broodingly. I ain't preaching no more much. The Spirit ain't in the people much no more. And worse than that, the Spirit ain't in me no more. Course, now and again the Spirit gets moving and I rip out a meeting. Or when folks sets out food, I give 'em a grace, but my heart ain't in it. I only do it 'cause they expect it. Jode mopped his face with his cap again. You ain't too damn holy to take a drink, are you? He asked. Casey seemed to see the bottle for the first time. He tilted it and took 3 big swallows. Nice drinking liquor, he said. Ought to be, said Jode. That's factory liquor. Cost $1. Casey took another swallow before he passed the bottle back. Yes, sir, he said. Yes, sir. Joe took the bottle from him and in politeness did not wipe the neck with his sleeve before he drank. He squatted on his hams and set the bottle upright against his coat roll. His fingers found a twig with which to draw his thoughts on the ground. He swept the leaves from a square and smoothed the dust. And he drew angles and made little circles. I ain't seen you in a long time, he said. Nobody seen me, said the preacher. I went off alone, and I sat and figured. The Spirit's strong in me, only it ain't the same. I ain't so sure of a lot of things. He sat up straighter against the tree. His bony hands dug its way like a squirrel into the overall pocket, brought out a black bitten plug of tobacco. Carefully, he brushed off bits of straw and gray pocket fuzz before he bit off a corner and settled the quid into his cheek. Jode waved his stick in negation when the plug was held out to him. The turtle dug at the rolled coat. Casey looked over at the stirring garment. What you got there, a chicken? You'll smother it. Joel rolled the coat up more tightly. "An old turtle," he said. "Picked him up on the road. An old bulldozer. Thought I'd take him to my little brother. Kids like turtles." The preacher nodded his head slowly. "Every kid got a turtle sometime or other. Nobody can't keep a turtle, though. They work at it, and at last one day they get out, and away they go off somewheres. It's like me. I wouldn't take the good old gospel that was laying there to my hand. I got to be picking at it and working at it until it got all torn down. Here I got the Spirit sometimes and nothing to preach about. I got the call to lead the people and no place to lead them." "Lead 'em around and around," said Joe. "Sling 'em in the irrigation ditch. Tell 'em they'll burn in hell if they don't think like you. What the hell you want to lead 'em someplace for? Just lead 'em." The straight trunk shade had stretched out along the ground. Jode moved gratefully into it and squatted on his hams and made a new smooth place on which to draw his thoughts with a stick. A thick-furred yellow shepherd dog came trotting down the road, head low, tongue lolling and dripping. Its tail hung limply curled, and it panted loudly. Jode whistled at it, but it only dropped its head an inch and trotted fast toward some definite destination. "Goin' someplace," Jode explained, a little piqued. "Goin' for home, maybe." The preacher could not be thrown from his subject. "Goin' someplace," he repeated. "That's right. He's goin' someplace. Me, I don't know where I'm goin'. I'll tell you what. I used to get the people jumpin' and talkin' in tongues and glory shoutin' till they just fell down and passed out. And some I'd baptize to bring 'em to. And then, you know what I'd do? I'd take one of them girls out in the grass and I'd lay with her. Done it every time. Then I'd feel bad and I'd pray and pray, but it didn't do no good. Come the next time, them and me was full of the Spirit. I'd do it again. I figured there just wasn't no hope for me, and I was a damn old hypocrite. But I didn't mean to be." Jode smiled and his long teeth parted and he licked his lips. "There ain't nothing like a good hot meetin' for pushin' 'em over," he said. "I'd done that myself." Casey leaned forward excitedly. "You see," he cried, "I seen it was that way, and I started thinking." He waved his bony big-knuckled hand up and down in a patting gesture. "I got to thinking like this. Here's me preaching grace, and here's them people getting grace so hard they're jumping and shouting. Now they say laying up with a girl comes from the devil. But the more grace a girl got in her, the quicker she wants to go out in the grass. And I got to thinking how in hell, how can the devil get in when a girl is so full of the Holy Spirit that it's spouting out of her nose and ears? You'd think that'd be one time when the devil didn't stand a snowball's chance in hell. But there it was. His eyes were shining with excitement. He worked his cheeks for a moment and then spat into the dust, and the gob of spit rolled over and over, picking up dust until it looked like a round, dry little pellet. The preacher spread out his head and looked at his palm, as though he were reading a book. "And there's me," he went on softly. "There's me, with all them people's souls in my hand, responsible and feeling my responsibility, and every time I lay with one of them girls. He looked over at Jode, and his face looked helpless. His expression asked for help. Jode carefully drew the torso of a woman in the dirt. Breast, hips, pelvis. I wasn't never a preacher, he said. I never let nothing get by when I could catch it. And I never had no ideas about it, except I was goddamn glad when I got one. But you wasn't a preacher, Casey insisted. A girl was just a girl to you. They wasn't nothing to you. But to me, they was holy vessels. I was saving their souls. And here, with all that responsibility on me, I just am frothing with the Holy Spirit, and then I'd take 'em out in the grass. Maybe I should have been a preacher, said Jode. He brought out his tobacco and papers and rolled a cigarette. He lighted it and squinted through the smoke at the preacher. I've been a long time without a girl, he said. It's going to take some catching up. Casey continued. It worried me till I couldn't get no sleep. Here I'd go to preaching and I'd say, by God, this time I ain't going to do it. And right while I said it, I knowed I was. You should have got a wife, said Jode. Preacher and his wife stayed at our place one time. Jehovites, they was. Slept upstairs. Held meeting in our barnyard. Us kids would listen. That preacher's missus took a god-awful pounding after every night meeting. I'm glad you told me, said Casey. I used to think it was just me. Finally, it gave me such pain, I quit and went off by myself and give her a damn good thinking about. He doubled up his legs and scratched between his dry, dusty toes. I says to myself, what's gnawing you? Is it the screwing? And I says, no, it's a sin. And I says, why is it that when a fella ought to be just about mule-ass proof against sin and all full up of Jesus, why is it that's the time a fella gets fingering his pants buttons? He said 2 fingers down in the palm in rhythm, as though he gently placed each word there, side by side. I says, maybe it ain't a sin. Maybe it's just the way folks is. Maybe we been whipping the hell out of ourselves for nothing. And I thought how some sisters took to beating themselves with a 3-foot shag of barbed wire. And I thought how maybe they like to hurt themselves, and maybe I like to hurt myself. Well, I was laying under a tree when I figured that out, and I went to sleep. And it come night, and it was dark when I come to. There was a coyote squawking nearby. Before I knowed it, I was saying out loud, the hell with it. There ain't no sin, and there ain't no virtue. There's just stuff people do. It's all part of the same thing. And some of the things folks do is nice, and some ain't nice. But that's as far as any man got a right to say. He paused and looked up from the palm of his hand where he had laid down the words. Jode was grinning at him, but Jode's eyes were sharp and interested too. You give her a going over, he said. You figured her out? Casey spoke again, and his voice rang with pain and confusion. I says, what's this call, this spirit? And I says, it's love. I love people so much. I'm fit to bust sometimes. And I says, don't you love Jesus? Well, I thought, and finally I says, no, I don't know nobody's name. Jesus. I know a bunch of stories, but I only love people. And sometimes I love 'em fit to bust, and I want to make 'em happy. So I've been preaching something, I thought would make him happy. And then, I've been talking a hell of a lot. Maybe you wonder about me using bad words. Well, they ain't bad to me no more. They're just words folks use, and they don't mean nothing bad with 'em. Anyways, I'll tell you one more thing I thought out. And from a preacher, it's the most unreligious thing. And I can't be a preacher no more because I thought it and I believe it. What's that? Jode asked. Casey looked shyly at him. If it hits you wrong, don't take no offense at it, will you? I don't take no offense, except a bust in the nose, said Jode. What did you figure? I figured about the Holy Spirit and the Jesus Road. I figured, why do we got to hang it on God or Jesus? Maybe I figured, maybe it's all men and all women we love. Maybe that's the Holy Spirit, the human spirit, the whole shebang. Maybe all men got one big soul everybody is a part of. Now I sat there thinking it, and all of a sudden, I knew it. I knew it so deep down that it was true. And I still know it. Jode's eyes dropped to the ground, as though he could not meet the naked honesty in the preacher's eyes. You can't hold no church with ideas like that, he said. People would drive you out of the country with ideas like that, jumping and yelling. That's what folks like. Makes them feel swell. When Grandma got to talking in tongues, you couldn't tie her down. She could knock over a full-grown deacon with her fist. Casey regarded him broodingly. Something I'd like to ask you, he said. Something that's been eating on me. Go ahead. I'll talk. Sometimes. Well, the preacher said slowly, here's you that I baptized, right? When I was in the glory roof tree. Got little hunks of Jesus jumping out of my mouth that day. You won't remember, 'cause you was busy pulling that pigtail. I remember, said Joe. That was Susie Little. She bust my finger a year later. Well, did you take any good out of that baptizing? Was your ways better? Joe thought about it. No, can't say as I felt anything. Well, did you take any bad from it? Think hard. Joe picked up the bottle and took a swig. There wasn't nothing in it, good or bad. I just had fun. He handed the flask to the preacher. He sighed and drank and looked at the low level of the whiskey and took another tiny drink. That's good, he said. I got to worrying about whether, in messing around, maybe I done somebody a hurt. Joe looked over toward his coat and saw the turtle, free of the cloth and hurrying away in the direction he had been following when Jode found him. Jode watched him for a moment and then got slowly to his feet and retrieved him and wrapped him in the coat again. I ain't got no present for the kids, he said. Nothing but this old turtle. It's a funny thing, the preacher said. I was thinking about old Tom Jode when you come along, thinking I'd call in on him. I used to think he was a godless man. How is Tom? I don't know how he is. I ain't been home in 4 years. Didn't he write to you? Jode was embarrassed. Well, Pa wasn't no hand to write for pretty or to write for writing. He'd sign up his name as nice as anybody and lick his pencil. But Pa never did write no letters. He always says what he couldn't tell a fella with his mouth wasn't worth leaning on no pencil about. Been out traveling around? Casey asked. Jode regarded him suspiciously. Didn't you hear about me? I was in all the papers. No, I never... What? He jerked one leg over the other and settled lower against the tree. The afternoon was advancing rapidly, and a richer tone was growing on the sun. Jode said pleasantly, "Might's well tell you now and get it over with. But if you was still preaching, I wouldn't tell. Fear you get praying over me." "I've been in McAllister them 4 years." Casey swung around to him, and his brows lowered so that his tall forehead seemed even taller. "Ain't wantin' to talk about it, huh? I won't ask you no questions if you done something bad." "I'd do what I done again," said Jode. "I killed a guy in a fight. We was drunk at a dance. He got a knife in me, and I killed him with a shovel that was laying there. Knocked his head plumb to squash." Casey's eyebrows resumed their normal level. "You ain't ashamed of nothing, then?" "No," said Jode. "I ain't. I got 7 years account of he had a knife in me. Got out in 4. Parole." "Then you ain't heard nothing about your folks for 4 years?" "Oh, I heard Ma sent me a card 2 years ago, and last Christmas Grandma sent a card. Jesus, the guys in the cell block laughed. Had a tree and shiny stuff, looks like snow. It says in poetry, 'Merry Christmas, pretty child, Jesus meek and Jesus mild. Underneath the Christmas tree, there's a gift for you from me.' I guess Grandma never read it. Probably got it from a drummer and picked out the one with the most shiny stuff on it. The guys in my cell block goddamn near died laughing. Jesus meek, they called me after that. Grandma never meant it funny. She just figured it was so purty she wouldn't bother to read it. She lost her glasses the year I went up. Maybe she never did find 'em." "How they treat you in McAllister?" Casey asked. "Oh, all right. You eat regular, and get clean clothes, and there's places to take a bath. It's pretty nice, some ways. Makes it hard not having no women." Suddenly he laughed. "They was a guy paroled," he said. "'Bout a month. He's back for breaking parole. A guy asked him why he bust his parole. 'Well, hell,' he says, 'they got no conveniences at my old man's place. Got no electric lights, got no shower baths, there ain't no books, and the food's lousy. Says he come back where they got a few conveniences, and he eats regular. He says it makes him feel lonesome out there in the open having to think what to do next. So he stole a car and come back.'" Joe got out his tobacco and blew a brown paper free of the pack and rolled a cigarette. "The guy's right, too," he said. "Last night, thinking where I'm going to sleep, I got scared. And I got thinking about my bunk, and I wonder what the stir-bug I got for a cellmate is doing. Me and some guys had a string band going. Good one. Guy said we ought to go on the radio. And this morning, I didn't know what time to get up. Just laid there, waiting for the bell to go off." Casey chuckled. "Fella can get so he misses the noise of a sawmill." The yellowing, dusty afternoon light put a golden color on the land. The corn stalks looked golden. A flight of swallows swooped overhead toward some waterhole. The turtle in Jode's coat began a new campaign of escape. Jode creased the visor of his cap. It was getting the long protruding curve of a crow's beak now. Guess I'll mosey along, he said. I hate to hit the sun, but it ain't so bad now. Casey pulled himself together. I ain't seen old Tom in a bug's age, he said. I was gonna look in on him anyway. I brang Jesus to your folks a long time, and I never took up a collection nor nothing but a bite to eat. Come along, said Joe. Pa'll be glad to see you. He always said you got too long a pecker for a preacher. He picked up his coat roll and tightened it snugly about his shoes and turtle. Casey gathered in his canvas sneakers and shoved his bare feet into them. I ain't got your confidence, he said. I'm always scared there's wire or glass under the dust. I don't know nothing I hate so much as a cut toe. They hesitated on the edge of the shade, and then they plunged into the yellow sunlight like two swimmers hastening to get to shore. After a few fast steps, they slowed to a gentle, thoughtful pace. The corn stalks threw gray shadows sideways now, and the raw smell of hot dust was in the air. The cornfield ended, the dark green cotton took its place. Dark green leaves threw a film of dust, and the bolls forming. It was spotty cotton, thick in the low places where water had stood, and bare on the high places. The plants strove against the sun, and distance towards the horizon was tanned to invisibility. The dust roads stretched out ahead of them, waving up and down. The willows of the stream lined across the west, and to the northwest a fallow section was going back to sparse brush. But the smell of burned dust was in the air, and the air was dry, so that mucus in the nose dried to a crust, and the eyes watered to keep the eyeballs from drying out. Casey said, See how good the corn come along until the dust got up? Being a dinger of a crop. Every year, said Jode, every year I can remember we had a good crop coming, and it never come. Grandpa says she was good the first 5 plowings, while the wild grass was still in her. The road dropped down a little hill and climbed up another rolling hill. Casey said, Old Tom's house can't be more 'n a mile from here. Ain't she over that third rise? Sure, said Joe, unless somebody stole it, like Pa stole it. Your Pa stole it? Sure, got it 1.5 miles east of here and drug it. Was a family living there, and they moved away. Grandpa and Pa and my brother Noah liked to took the whole house, but she wouldn't come. They only got part of her. That's why she looks so funny on one end. They cut her in two and drug her over with 12 head of horses and 2 mules. They was going back for the other half and stick her together again. But before they got there, Wink Manley come with his boys and stole the other half. Pa and Grandpa was pretty sore. But a little later, them and Wink got drunk together and laughed their heads out about it. Wink, he says his house is at stud, and if we'll bring our'n over and breed 'em, well, maybe get a litter of crop houses. Wink was a great old fellow when he was drunk. After that, him and Pa and Grandpa was friends. Got drunk together every chance they got. Tom's a great one, Casey agreed. They plodded dustily on down to the bottom of the draw, and then slowed their steps for the rise. Casey wiped his forehead with his sleeve and put on his flat-topped hat again.
Yes, he repeated. Tom was a great one. For a godless man, he was a great one. I seen him in meetin' sometimes, when the spirit got into him, just a little, and I seen him take 10, 12 foot jumps. I tell you, when old Tom got a dose of the Holy Spirit, you got to move fast to keep from getting run down and trumped, jumpy as a stud horse in a box stall. They topped the next rise, and the road dripped into old water cut, ugly and raw, a ragged course, and freshet scars cutting into it from both sides. A few stones were in the crossing. Joe minced across in his bare feet. You talk about Pa, he said. Maybe you never seen Uncle John, the time they baptized him over to Polk's place. Why, he got to plunging and jumped over a feeny bush as big as a piano. Over he'd jump, and back he'd jump, howling like a dog wolf in moontime. Well, Pa seen him, and Pa, he figures, he's the best Jesus jumper in these parts. So Pa picks out a feeny bush, about twice it as big as Uncle John's feeny bush, and Pa lets out a squawk like a sow littering broken bottles, and he takes a run at the feeny bush and clears her and burst his right leg. That took the spirit out of Pa. Preacher wants to pray it. Set. Pa says, no. By God, he'd got his heart full of having a doctor. Well, they wasn't a doctor, but they was a traveling dentist. And he said her. Preacher give her a praying over anyways. They plodded up the little rise on the other side of the water cut. Now that the sun was on the wane, some of its impact was gone, and while the air was hot, the hammering rays were weaker. The strong wire on crooked poles still edged the road. On the right-hand side, a line of wire fence strung out across the cotton field. And the dusty green cotton was the same on both sides, dusty and dry and dark green. Joe pointed to the boundary fence. That there's our line. We didn't really need no fence there, but we had the wire, and Pa kinda liked her there. Said it give him a feeling that 40 was 40. Wouldn't have had the fence if Uncle John didn't come driving in one night with 6 spools of wire in his wagon. He gave 'em to Pa for a shout. We never did know where he got that wire. They slowed for the rise, moving their feet in the deep, soft dust, feeling the earth with their feet. Joe's eyes were inward on his memory. He seemed to be laughing inside himself. Uncle John was a crazy bastard, he said, like what he done with that shoat. He chuckled and walked on. Jim Casey waited impatiently. The story did not continue. Casey gave it a good long time to come out. Well, what did he do with that shoat? He demanded at last, with some irritation. Huh? Oh, well, he killed that shoat right there, and he got Ma to light up the stove. He cut out pork chops and put 'em on the pan, and he put ribs and a leg in the oven. He ate chops till the ribs was done, and he ate ribs till the leg was done. And then he tore into that leg, cut off big hunks of her, and shoved 'em in his mouth. Us kids hung around slavering, and he give us some, but he wouldn't give Pa none. By and by, he ate so much, he throwed up and went to sleep. While he's asleep, us kids and Pa finished off the leg. Well, when Uncle John woke up in the morning, he slaps another leg in the oven. Pa says, John, you gonna eat that whole damn pig? And he says, I aim to, Tom, but I'm scared some of her spoil before I get her at hungry as I am for pork. Maybe you better get a plate and give me back a couple rolls of wire. Well, sir, Pa wasn't no fool. He just let Uncle John go on and eat himself sick of pig, and when he drove off, he hadn't et much more'n half. Pa says, why don't you salt her down? But not Uncle John. When he wants pig, he wants a whole pig. And when he's through, he don't want no pig hanging around. So off he goes, and Pa salts down what's left. Casey said, well, I was still in the preaching spirit. I'd have made a lesson of that and spoke it to you. But I don't do that no more. What you suppose he done a thing like that for? I don't know, said Joe. He just got hungry for pork. Makes me hungry just to think of it. I had just 4 slices of roasting pork in 4 years. 1 slice every Christmas. Casey suggested elaborately, maybe Tom will kill the fatted calf like for the prodigal in Scripture. Joe laughed scornfully. You don't know Pa. If he kills a chicken, most of the squawking will come from Pa, not the chicken. He don't never learn. He's always saving a pig for Christmas, and then it dies in September of bloat or something. So he can't eat it. When Uncle John wanted pork, he ate pork. He had her. They moved over the curving top of the hill and saw the Jode place below them. And Jode stopped. It ain't the same, he said. Look at that house. Something's happened. There ain't nobody there. The two stood and stared at the little cluster of buildings. Chapter 5. The owners of the land came onto the land, or more often a spokesman for the owners came. They came in closed cars and they felt the dry earth with their fingers, and sometimes they drove big earth augers into the ground for soil tests. The tenants, from their sun-beaten dooryards, watched uneasily, and the closed cars drove along the fields. And at last, the owner man drove into the dooryards and sat in their cars to talk out of the windows. The tenant men stood beside the cars for a while, and then squatted on their hams and found sticks with which to mark the dust. In the open doors, the women stood looking out, and behind them the children, corn-headed children, with wide eyes, one barefoot on top of the other barefoot, and the toes working. The women and the children watched their men talking to the owner men. They were silent. Some of the owner men were kind because they hated what they had to do, and some of them were angry because they hated to be cruel, and some of them were cold because they had long ago found that no one could be an owner unless one were cold. And all of them were caught in something larger than themselves. Some of them hated the mathematics and drove them, and some were afraid, and some worshipped the mathematics because it provided a refuge from thought and from feeling. If a bank or a finance company owned the land, the owner man said, the bank or the company needs, wants, insists, must have, has, as though the bank or the company were a monster with thought and feeling which had ensnared them. These last would take no responsibility for the banks or the companies because they were men and slaves, while the banks were machines and masters all at the same time. Some of the owner men were a little proud to be slaves so much cold and powerful masters. The owner men sat in the cars and explained, "You know the land is poor. You've scrabbled at it long enough, God knows." The squatting tenant men nodded and wondered and drew fingers in the dust. And yes, they knew, God knows. If the dust only wouldn't fly, if the top would only stay on the soil, it might not be so bad. The owner men went on leading to their point. You know the land's getting poorer. You knew what cotton does to the land. Robs it. Sucks it all the blood out of it. The squatters nodded. They knew. God knew. If they could only rotate the crops, they might pump blood back into the land. Well, it's too late. And the owner men explained the workings and the thinkings of the monster that was stronger than they were. A man can hold land if he can just eat and pay taxes. He can do that. Yes, he can do that until the crops fail one day and he has to borrow money from the bank. But you see, a bank or a company can't do that because those creatures don't breathe air. They eat side meat. They breathe profits. They eat the interest on money. If they don't get it, they die the way you die without air, without side meat. It is a sad thing, but it is so. It is just so. The squatting men raised their eyes to understand. Can't we just hang on? Maybe the next year will be a good year. God knows how much cotton next year. And with all the wars, God knows what price cotton will bring. Don't they make explosives out of cotton? And uniforms? Get enough wars and cottons will hit the ceiling. Next year, maybe. They looked up questioningly. We can't depend on it. The bank, the monster has to have profits all the time. It can't wait. It'll die. No taxes, go on. When the monster stops growing, it dies. It can't stay one size. Soft fingers began to tap the sill of the car window, and hard fingers tightened on the restless drawing sticks. In the doorways of the sun-beaten tenant houses, women sighed and then shifted feet so that one that had been down was now on top, and the toes working. Dogs came sniffling near the owner cars and wetted on 4 tires, one after another. And chickens lay in the sunny dust and fluffed their feathers to get the cleansing dust down to the skin. In the little sties, the pigs grunted inquiringly over the muddy remnants of the slops. The squatting men looked down again. What do you want us to do? We can't take less share of the crop. We're half starved now. The kids are hungry all the time. We got no clothes, torn and ragged. If all the neighbors weren't the same, we'd be ashamed to go to a meeting. And at last the owner men came to the point. The tenant system won't work anymore. One man on a tractor can take the place of 12 or 14 families, pay him a wage, and take all the crop. We have to do it. We don't like to do it. But the monster's sick. Something's happened to the monster. But you'll kill the land with cotton. We know. We've got to take cotton quick before the land dies. And we'll sell the lands. Lots of families in the East would like to own a piece of land. The tenant men looked up alarmed. But what'll happen to us? How will we eat? You'll have to get off the land. The ploughs'll go through the dooryard. And now the squatting men stood up angrily. Grandpa took up the land, and he had to kill the Indians and drive them away. And Pa was born here, and he killed weeds and snakes. Then a bad year came, and he had to borrow a little money. And we was born here. There in the door, our children born here. And Pa had to borrow money. The bank owned the land then, but we stayed, and we got a little bit of what we raised. We know that. All that. It's not us, it's the bank. A bank isn't like a man, or an owner with 50,000 acres. He isn't like a man either. That's the monster. Sure, cried the tenant men, but it's our land. We measured it and broke it up. We were born on it, and we got killed on it, died on it. Even if it's no good, it's still ours. That's what makes it ours. Being born on it, working it, dying on it. That makes ownership, not a paper with numbers on it. We're sorry. It's not us. It's the monster. The bank isn't like a man. Yes, but the bank is only made of men. No, you're wrong there. Quite wrong there. The bank is something else than men. It happens that every man in a bank hates what the bank does, and yet the bank does it. The bank is something more than a men, I tell you. It's the monster. Men made it, but they can't control it. The tenants cried, Grandpa killed Indians. Pa killed snakes for the land. Maybe we can kill banks. They're worse than Indians and snakes. Maybe we got to fight to keep our land, like Pa and Grandpa did. And now the owner men grew angry. You'll have to go. But it's ours, the tenant men cried. We, no. The bank, the monster owns it. You'll have to go. We'll get our guns, like Grandpa, when the Indians came. What then? Well, first the sheriff, and then the troops. You'll be stealing if you try to stay. You'll be murderers if you kill to stay. The monster isn't men, but it can make men do what it wants. But if we go, where'll we go? How will we go? We got no money. We're sorry, said the ownerman. The bank, the 50,000-acre owner, can't be responsible. You're on land that isn't yours. Once over the line, maybe you can pick cotton in the fall. Maybe you can go on relief. Why don't you go on west to California? There's work there, and it never gets cold. Why, you can reach out anywhere and pick an orange. Why, there's always some kind of crop to work in. Why don't you go there? And the ownermen started their cars and rolled away. The tenant men squatted down on their hams again, to mark the dust with a stick, to figure, to wonder. Their sunburned faces were dark, and their sun-whipped eyes were light. The women moved cautiously out of the doorways toward their men, and the children crept behind the women, cautiously, ready to run. The bigger boys squatted beside their fathers, because that made them men. After a time, the woman asked, What did he want? And the men looked up for a second, and the smolder of pain was in their eyes. We got to get off. A tractor and a superintendent. Like factories. Where'll we go? The woman asked. We don't know. We don't know. And the women went quickly, quietly back into the houses and herded the children ahead of them. They knew that a man so hurt and so perplexed may turn in anger even on people he loves. They left the men alone to figure and to wonder in the dust. After a time, perhaps, the tenant man looked about at the pump put in 10 years ago, with a gooseneck handle and iron flowers on the spout, at the chopping block where 1,000 chickens had been killed, at the hand plow lying in the shed, and the patent crib hanging in the rafters over it. The children crowded about the women in the houses. "What are we going to do, Ma? Where are we going to go?" The woman said, "We don't know yet. Go out and play, but don't go near your father. He might wail you if you go near him." And the woman went on with the work, but all the time they watched the men squatting in the dust, perplexed and figuring. The tractors came over the roads and into the fields, great crawlers moving like insects, having the incredible strength of insects. They crawled over the ground, laying the track and rolling on it and picking it up. Diesel tractors, puttering while they stood idle. They thundered when they moved, and then settled down to a droning roar. Snub-nosed monsters raising the dust and sticking their snouts into it, straight down the country, across the country, through fences, through dooryards, in and out of gullies in straight lines. They did not run on the ground, but on their own roadbeds. They ignored hills and gulches, watercourses, fences, houses. The man sitting in the iron seat did not look like a man. Gloved, goggled, rubber dust mask over nose and mouth, he was a part of the monster, a robot in the seat. The thunder of the cylinders sounded through the country, became one with the air and the earth, so that earth and air muttered in sympathetic vibration. The driver could not control it. Straight across country it went, cutting through a dozen farms and straight back. A twitch at the controls would swerve the cat, but the driver's hands could not twitch because the monster that built the tractor, the monster that sent the tractor out, had somehow got into the driver's hands, into the brain and muscle. Had goggled him and muzzled him, goggled his mind, muzzled his speech, goggled his perception, muzzled his protest. He could not see the land as it was. He could not smell the land as it smelled. His feet did not stamp the clouds or feel the warmth and power of the earth. He sat in an iron seat and stepped on iron pedals. He could not cheer or beat or curse or encourage the extension of his power, and because of this he could not cheer or whip or curse or encourage himself. He did not know or own or trust or beseech the land. If a seed dropped did not germinate, it was nothing. If the young thrusting plant withered in drought or drowned in a flood of rain, it was no more to the driver than to the tractor. He loved the land no more than the bank loved the land. He could admire the tractor, its machine surfaces, its surge of power, the roar of its detonating cylinders. But it was not his tractor. Behind the tractor rolled the shining discs, cutting the earth with blades, not plowing, but surgery, pushing the cut earth to the right, where the second row of discs cut it and pushed it to the left, slicing blades, shining, polished by the cut earth. And pulled behind the disc the harrows, combing with iron teeth so that the little clods broke up and the earth lay smooth. Behind the harrows, the long cedars, 12 curved iron peans erected in the foundry, orgasms set by gears, raping methodically, raping without passion. The driver sat in his iron seat, and he was proud of the straight lines he did not will, proud of the tractor he did not own or love, proud of the power he could not control. And when that crop grew and was harvested, no man had crumbled a hot clod in his fingers and let the earth sift past his fingertips. No man had touched the seed or lusted for the growth. Men ate what they had not raised, had no connection with the bread. The land bore under iron, and under iron gradually died, for it was not loved or hated. It had no prayers or curses. At noon, the tractor driver stopped sometimes near a tenant house and opened his lunch. Sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, white bread, pickle, cheese, spam, a piece of pie branded like an engine part. He ate without relish. And tenants, not yet moved away, came out to see him, looked curiously while the goggles were taken off, and the rubber dust mask, leaving white circles around the eyes and a large white circle around the nose and mouth. The exhaust of the tractor puttered on, for fuel is so cheap it is more efficient to leave the engine running than to heat the diesel nose for a new start. Curious children crowded close, ragged children who ate their fried dough as they watched. They watched hungrily at the unwrapping of the sandwiches, and their hunger-sharpened noses smelled the pickle, cheese, and spam. They didn't speak to the driver. They watched his hand as it carried food to his mouth. They did not watch him chewing. Their eyes followed the hand and held the sandwich. After a while, the tenant, who could not leave the place, came out and squatted in the shade beside the tractor. "Why, you're Joe Davies' boy." "Sure," the driver said. "Well, what are you doing this kind of work for, against your own people?" $3 a day. I got damn sick of creeping for my dinner and not getting it. I got a wife and kids. We gotta eat. $3 a day, and it comes every day." "That's right," the tenant said. "Before your $3 a day, 15 or 20 families can't eat at all. Nearly 100 people have to go out and wander on the roads for your $3 a day. Is that right?" And the driver said, "Can't think of that. Got to think of my own kids. $3 a day, and it comes every day. Times are changing, mister. Don't you know? Can't make a living on the land unless you've got 2, 5, 10,000 acres and a tractor. Cropland isn't for little guys like us anymore. You don't kick up a howl because you can't make Fords, or because you're not the telephone company. Well, crops are like that now. Nothing to do about it. You try to get $3 a day someplace. That's the only way." The tenant pondered. Funny thing how it is. If a man owns a little property, that property is him. It's part of him, and it's like him. If he owns property only so he can walk on it and handle it and be sad when it isn't doing well, and be sad when it isn't doing well, and feel fine when the rain falls on it, that property is him. And some way he's bigger because he owns it. Even if he isn't successful, he's big with his property. That is so. And the tenant pondered more. But let a man get property he doesn't see, or can't take time to get his fingers in, or can't be there to walk on it. Why, then the property is the man. He can't do what he wants. He can't think what he wants. The property is the man, stronger than he is. And he is small, not big. Only his possessions are big, and he's the servant of his property. That is so too. The driver munched the branded pie and threw the crust away. Times are changing, don't you know? Thinking about stuff like that don't feed the kids. Get your $3 a day, feed your kids. You got no call to worry about anybody's kids but your own. You get a reputation for talking like that, and you'll never get $3 a day. Big shots won't give you $3 a day if you worry about anything but your $3 a day. Nearly 100 people on the road for your $3. Where will we go? And that reminds me, the driver said. You better get out soon. I'm going through the dooryard after dinner. You filled in the well this morning. I know. Had to keep the line straight. But I'm going through the dooryard after dinner. Got to keep the line straight. And well, you know, Joe Davis, my old man, so I'll tell you this. I got orders wherever there's a family not moved out. If I have an accident, get too close and cave the house in a little, well, I might get a couple of dollars. And my youngest kid never had no shoes yet. I built it with my hands. Straightened old nails to put the sheathing on. Rafters are wired to the stringers with bowling wire. It's mine. I built it. You bump it down, I'll be in the window with a rifle. You even come too close, and I'll pot you like a rabbit. It's not me. There's nothing I can do. I'll lose my job if I don't do it. And look, suppose you kill me. They'll just hang you. But long before you're hung, there'll be another guy on the tractor, and he'll bump the house down. You're not killing the right guy. That's so, the tenant said. Who gave you orders? I'll go after him. He's the one to kill. You're wrong. He's got his orders from the bank. The bank told him. Clear those people out, or it's your job. Well, there's a president of the bank. There's a board of directors. I'll fill up the magazine of the rifle and go into the bank. The driver said, Fellow was telling me the bank gets orders from east. The orders were, make the land show profit or we'll close you out. But where does it stop? Who can we shoot? I don't aim to starve to death before I kill the man that's starving me. I don't know. Maybe there's nobody to shoot. Maybe the thing isn't meant at all. Maybe, like you said, the property's doing it. Anyway, I told you my orders. I got to figure, the tenant said. We all got to figure. There's some way to stop this. It's not like lightning or earthquakes. We've got a bad thing made by man. And by God, that's something we can change. The tenant sat in his doorway, and the driver thundered his engine and started off, tracks falling and curving, harrows combing, and the valley of the cedar slipping into the ground. Across the dooryard the tractor cut, and the hard, foot-beaten ground was seeded field, and the tractor cut through again. The uncut space was 10 feet wide, and back he came. The iron guard bit into the house corner, crumbled the wall, and wrenched the little house from its foundation, so that it fell sideways, crushed like a bug. And the driver was goggled, and a rubber mask covered his nose and mouth. The tractor cut a straight line on, and the air and the ground vibrated with its thunder. The tenant man stared after it, his rifle in his hand. His wife was beside him, and the quiet children behind. And all of them stared after the tractor. Chapter 6. The Reverend Casey and young Tom stood on the hill and looked down on the Joad place. The small unpainted house was mashed at one corner, and it had been pushed off its foundations so that it slumped at an angle. Its blind front windows pointed at a spot of sky well above the horizon. The fences were gone, and the cotton grew in the dooryard and up against the house, and the cotton was about the shed barn. The outhouse lay on its side, and the cotton grew close against it. Where the dooryard had been pounded hard by the bare feet of children, and by stamping horses' hoofs, and by the broad wagon wheels, it was cultivated now, and the dark green dusty cotton grew. Young Tom stared for a long time at the ragged willow beside the dry horse through at the concrete base where the pump had been. "Jesus," he said at last. "Hell must have popped here. There ain't nobody living there." At last he moved quickly down the hill, and Casey followed him. He looked into the barn shed, deserted, a little ground straw on the floor, and at the mule stall in the corner. And as he looked in there was a skittering on the floor, and a family of mice faded in under the straw. Jode paused at the entrance to the tool shed lean-to, and no tools were there. A broken plow point, a mess of hay wire in the corner, an iron wheel from a hay rake, and a rat-gnawed mule collar. A flat gallon oil can, crusted with dirt and oil, and a pair of torn overalls hanging on a nail. "There ain't nothing left," said Jode. "We had pretty nice tools." "There ain't nothing left," Casey said. "If I was still a preacher, I'd say the arm of the Lord had struck. But now I don't know what happened. I been away. I didn't hear nothing." They walked toward the concrete well cap, walked through cotton plants to get to it, and the bolls were forming on the cotton, and the land was cultivated. "We never planted here," Jode said. "We always kept this clear. Why, you can't get a horse in now without he trumps the cotton." They paused at the dry watering trough, and the proper weeds that should grow under the trough were gone, and the old thick wood of the trough was dry and cracked. On the well cap, the bolts that had held the pump stuck up, their threads rusty and the nuts gone. Jode looked into the tube of the well and spat and listened. He dropped a clod down the well and listened. "She was a good well," he said. "I can't hear water." He seemed reluctant to go to the house. He dropped clod after clod down the well. "Maybe they're all dead," he said. "But somebody had told me. I'd 'a got word some way." "Maybe they left a letter or something to tell in the house." "Would they have knowed you was coming out?" "I don't know," said Jode. "No, I guess not. I didn't know myself till a week ago." "Let's look in the house. She's all pushed out of shape. Something knocked the hell out of her." They walked slowly toward the sagging house. Two of the supports of the porch roof were pushed out so that the roof flopped down on one end, and the house corner was crushed in. Through a maze of splintered wood, the room at the corner was visible. The front door hung open inward, and a low, strong gate across the front door hung outward on leather hinges. Jode stopped at the step. "A 12-by-12 timber. Doorstops here," he said. "But they're gone. Or Ma's dead." He pointed to the low gate across the front door. "If Ma was anywheres about, that gate'll be shut and hooked. That's one thing she always done. seen that gate was shut. His eyes were warm. Ever since the pig got in over to Jacobs and ate the baby. Millie Jacobs was just out in the barn. She come in while the pig was still eating it. Well, Millie Jacobs was in a family way, and she went raving. Never did get over it. Touched ever since. But Ma took a lesson from it. She never let that pig gate open less she was in the house herself. Never did forget. No, they're gone, or dead. He climbed to the split porch and looked into the kitchen. The windows were broken out, and throwing rocks lay on the floor. And the floor and walls sagged steeply away from the door, and the sifted dust was on the boards. Joe pointed to the broken glass and the rocks. Kids, he said. They'll go 20 miles to bust a window. I done it myself. They know when a house is empty. They know. That's the first thing kids do when folks move out. The kitchen was empty of furniture, stove gone, and the round stovepipe hole in the wall showing light. On the sink shelf lay an old beer opener and a broken fork with its wooden handle gone. Jones slipped cautiously into the room, and the floor groaned under his weight. An old copy of the Philadelphia Ledger was on the floor against the wall, its pages yellow and curling. Joe looked into the bedroom. No bed, no chairs, nothing. On the wall, a picture of an Indian girl in color labeled Red Wing. A bed slat leaning against the wall, and in one corner a woman's high button shoe, curled up at the toe and broken over the instep. Jode picked it up and looked at it. I remember this, he said. This was Ma's. It's all worn out now. Ma liked them shoes. Had 'em for years. No, they've went and took everything. The sun had lowered until it came through the angled end windows now, and it flashed on the edges of the broken glass. Joe turned at last and went out and crossed the porch. He sat down on the edge of it and rested his bare feet on the 12-by-12 step. The evening light was on the fields, and the cotton plants threw long shadows on the ground, and the molting willow tree threw a long shadow. Casey sat down beside Jode. They never wrote you nothing? He asked. No, like I said, there wasn't people to write. Pa could write, but he wouldn't. Didn't like to. It give him the shivers to write. He could work out a catalog order as good as the next fella, but he wouldn't write no letters just for ducks. They sat side by side, staring off into the distance. Jode laid his rolled coat on the porch beside him. His independent hands rolled a cigarette, smoothed it, and lighted it, and he inhaled deeply and blew the smoke out through his nose. Something's wrong, he said. I can't put my finger on her. I got an itch that something's wronger in hell. Just this house pushed around, and my folks gone. Casey said, right over there the ditch was, where I done the baptizing. You wasn't mean, but you was tough. Hung on to that little girl's pigtail like a bulldog. We baptize you both in the name of the Holy Ghost. and still you hung on. Old Tom says, "Hole 'em under water." So I shove your head down till you start to bubbling before you'd let go of that pigtail. You wasn't mean, but you was tough. Sometimes a tough kid grows up with a big jolt of the spirit in him. A lean gray cat came sneaking out of the barn and crept through the cotton plants to the end of the porch. It leaped silently up to the porch and crept low-bellied toward the men. It came to a place between and behind the two, and then it sat down, and its tail stretched out straight and flat to the floor, and the last inch of it flicked. The cat sat and looked off into the distance where the men were looking. Joe glanced around at it. "By God, look who's here!" Somebody stayed. He put out his hand, but the cat leaped away out of reach and sat down and licked the pads of its lifted paw. Joe looked at it, and his face was puzzled. "I know what's the matter," he cried. "That cat just made me figure what's wrong." "Seems to me there's lots wrong," said Casey. "No, it's more in just this place. Why'n't that cat just move in with some neighbors with the Rances? How come nobody ripped some lumber off this house? Ain't been nobody here for 3 or 4 months, and nobody stole no lumber. Nice planks on the barn shed, plenty good planks on the house, window frames, and nobody's took 'em. That ain't right. That's what's bothering me. And I couldn't catch hold of her. Well, what's that figure out for you?" Casey reached down and slipped off his sneakers and wriggled his long toes on the step. "I don't know. Seems like maybe there ain't any neighbors. If there was, would all them nice planks be here? Why, Jesus Christ, Albert Rance took his family, kids, and dogs and all, into Oklahoma City one Christmas. They was going to visit with Albert's cousin. Well, folks around here thought Albert moved away without saying nothing. Figured maybe he got debts or some woman squaring off at him. When Albert came back a week later, there wasn't a thing left in his house. Stove was gone, beds was gone, window frames was gone, and 8 feet of planking was gone off the south side of the house, so you could look right through her. He come driving home just as Muley Graves was going away with the doors and the well pump. Took Albert 2 weeks driving around the neighbors before he got his stuff back. Casey scratched his toes luxuriously. Didn't nobody give him an argument? All of 'em just give the stuff up? Sure, they wasn't stealing it. They thought he left it, and they just took it. He got all of it back, all but a sofa pillow, velvet with a picture of an Injun on it. Albert claimed Grandpa got it. Claimed Grandpa got Injun blood, and that's why he wants that picture. Well, Grandpa did get her, but he didn't give a damn about the picture on it. He just liked her. He used to pack her around, and he'd put her wherever he was going to sit. He never would give her back to Albert. Says if Albert wants his pillow so bad, let him come and get her. But he better come shooting, 'cause I'll blow his goddamn stinking head off if he comes messing around my pillow. So finally Albert give up and made Grandpa a present of that pillow. It give Grandpa ideas, though. He took to saving chicken feathers. Says he's going to have a whole damn bed of feathers. But he never got no feather bed. One time, Pa got mad at the skunk under the house. Pa slapped that skunk with a 2x4, and Ma burned all Grandpa's feathers so we could live in the house. He laughed. Grandpa's a tough old bastard. Just sat on that engine pillar and says, "Let Albert come and get her." Why, he says, "I'll take that squirt and wring him out like a pair of drawers." The cat crept close between the men again, and its tail lay flat, and its whiskers jerked now and then. The sun dropped low toward the horizon, and the dusty air was red and golden. The cat reached out a gray, questioning paw and touched Jode's coat. He looked around. "Hell, I forgot the turtle. I ain't gonna pack it all over hell." He unwrapped the land turtle and pushed it under the house. But in a moment it was out, headed southwest, as it had been from the first. The cat leapt at it and struck at its straining head and slashed at its moving feet. The old, hard, humorous head was pulled in, and the thick tail slapped in under the shell. And when the cat grew tired of waiting for it and walked off, the turtle headed on southwest again. Young Tom Joad and the preacher watched the turtle go waving its legs and boosting its heavy, high dune shell along toward the southwest. The cat crept along behind for a while, but in a dozen yards it arched its back to a strong, taut bough and yawned, and came stealthily back toward the seated men. "Where the hell you suppose he's going?" said Jode. "I've seen turtles all my life. They're always going someplace. They always seem to want to get there." The gray cat seated itself between and behind them again. It blinked slowly. The skin over its shoulders jerked forward under a flea, and then slipped slowly back. The cat lifted a paw and inspected it, flicked its claws out and in again experimentally, and licked its pads with a shell-pink tongue. The red sun touched the horizon and spread out like a jellyfish, and the sky above it seemed much brighter and more alive than it had been. Jode unrolled his new yellow shoes from his coat, and he brushed his dusty feet with his hand before he slipped them on. The preacher started off across the fields, said, "Somebody's coming. Look, down there, right through the cotton." Jode looked where Casey's finger pointed. "Comin' afoot," he said. "Can't see him for the dust he raises. Who the hell's comin' here?" They watched the figure approaching in the evening light, and the dust it raised was reddened by the setting sun. "A man," said Jode. The man drew closer, and as he walked past the barn, Jode said, "Why, I know him." "You know him? That's Muley Graves." And he called, "Hey, Muley! Howya?" The approaching man stopped, startled by the call, and then he came on quickly. He was a lean man, rather short. His movements were jerky and quick. He carried a gunny sack in his hand. His blue jeans were pale at knee and seat, and he wore an old black suit coat, stained and spotted, the sleeves torn loose from the shoulders and back, and ragged holes worn through at the elbows. His black hat was as stained as his coat, and the band, torn half free, flopped up and down as he walked. Muley's face was smooth and unwrinkled, but it wore the truculent look of a bad child's, the mouth held tight and small, the little eyes half scowling, half petulant. You remember Muley? Jode said softly to the preacher. Who's that? The advancing man called. Jode did not answer. Muley came close, very close, before he made out the faces. Well, I'll be damned, he said. It's Tommy Jode. When you get out, Tommy? 2 days ago, said Jode. Took a little time to hitchhike home. And look here what I find. Where's my folks, Muley? What's the house all smashed up for? And cotton planted in the dooryard? By God, it's lucky I come by, said Muley, 'cause old Tom worried himself. When they was fixin' to move, I was settin' in the kitchen there. I just told Tom I wasn't gonna move, by God. I told him that. And Tom says, I'm worrying myself about Tommy. Suppose he comes home and they ain't nobody here. What'll he think? I says, why don't you write down a letter? And Tom says, maybe I will. I'll think about her. But if I don't, you keep your eye out for Tommy, if you're still around. I'll be around, I says. I'll be around till hell freezes over. There ain't nobody can run a guy named of Graves out of this country. And they ain't done it, neither. Jode said impatiently, where's my folks? Tell about you standing up to 'em later. But where's my folks? Well, they was gonna stick her out when the bank came to tractorin' off the place. Your grandpa stood out here with a rifle and he blowed the headlights off that cat. But she come on just the same. Your grandpa didn't want to kill the guy driving that cat. And that was Willie Freely. And Willie knowed it. He just come on and bumped the hell out of the house and give her a shake like a dog shakes a rat. Well, it took something out of Tom. Kinda got into him. He ain't been the same ever since. Where's my folks? Jode spoke angrily. What I'm telling you. Took 3 trips with your Uncle John's wagon. Took the stove and the pump and the beds. You should have seen them beds go out with all them kids and your grandpa and grandma setting up against the headboard and your brother Noah sitting there smoking a cigarette and spitting la-di-da over the side of the wagon. Jode opened his mouth to speak. They're all at your Uncle John's, Muley said quickly. Oh, all at John's. Well, what they doing there? Now stick to her for a second, Muley. Just stick to her. In just a minute, you can go on your own way. What they doing there? Well, they've been chopping cotton, all of them. Even the kids and your grandpa. Getting money together so they can shove on west. Gonna buy a car and shove on west where it's easy living. There ain't nothing here. 50 cents a clean acre for chopping cotton. And folks begging for the chance to go chop. And they ain't gone yet. No, said Muley. Not that I know. Last I heard was 4 days ago, when I seen your brother Noah out shooting jackrabbits, and he says they're aiming to go in about 2 weeks. John got his notice. He got to get off. You just go on about 8 miles to John's place. You'll find your folks piled in John's house like gophers in a winter burrow. Okay, said Jode. Now you can ride on your own way. You ain't changed a bit, Muley. If you want to tell about something off northwest, you point your nose straight southeast. Muley said truculently, you ain't changed neither. You was a smart aleck kid, and you're still a smart aleck. You ain't telling me how to skin my life, by any chancet. Jode grinned. No, I ain't. If you want to drive your head into a pile of broken glass, there ain't nobody can tell you different. You know this here preacher, don't you, Muley? Reverend Casey? Why, sure. You didn't look over. Remember him well. Casey stood up, and the two shook hands. Glad to see you again, said Muley. You ain't been around for a hell of a long time. I've been off asking questions, said Casey. What happened here? Why are they kicking folks off the land? Muley's mouth snapped shut so tight that a little parrot's beak in the middle of his upper lip stuck down over his underlip. He scowled. Them sons of bitches, he said. Them dirty sons of bitches. I tell you, men, I'm staying. They ain't getting rid of me. If they throw me off, I'll come back. And if they figure I'll be quiet underground, why, I'll take couple three of the sons of bitches along for company. He patted a heavy weight in his side coat pocket. I ain't a-going. My pa come here 50 years ago, and I ain't a-going. Jode said, What's the idea of kicking the folks off? Oh, they talk pretty about it. You know, what kind of years we've been having. Dust coming up and spoiling everything, so a man didn't get enough crop to plug up an ant's ass. And everybody's got bills at the grocery. You know how it is. Well, the folks that owns the land says we can't afford to keep no tenants. And they says the share a tenant gets is just the margin of profit we can't afford to lose. And they says if we put all our land in one piece, we can just hardly make her pay. So they tractored all the tenants off of the land. All except me. And by God, I ain't going. Tommy, you know me. You know me all your life. Damn right, said Joe. All my life. Well, you know I ain't a fool. I know this land ain't much good. Never was much good, 'cept for grazing. Never should have broke her up. And now she's cuttin' damn near to death. If only they didn't tell me I got to get off, why, I'd probably be in California right now, a-eatin' grapes and a-pickin' an orange when I wanted. But them sons of bitches says I gotta get off. And Jesus Christ, a man can't when he's told to. Sure, said Joe. I wonder Pa went so easy. I wonder Grandpa didn't kill nobody. Nobody never told Grandpa where to put his feet. And Ma ain't nobody you can push around either. I seen her beat the hell out of a tin peddler with a live chicken one time, 'cause he give her an argument. She had the chicken in one hand and the axe in the other, about to cut its head off. She aimed to go for that peddler with the axe, and she forgot which hand was which, and she takes after him with the chicken. Couldn't even eat that chicken when she got done. There wasn't nothing but a pair of legs in her hand. Grandpa throwed his hip out of joint laughing. How'd my folks go so easy? Well, the guy that come around talked nice as pie. You got to get off. It ain't my fault. Well, I says, whose fault is it? I'll go and I'll nut the fella. It's the Shawnee Land and Cattle Company. I just got orders. Who's the Shawnee Land and Cattle Company? It ain't nobody. It's a company. Got a fella crazy. There wasn't nobody you could lay for. A lot of the folks just got tired out looking for something to be mad at. But not me. I'm mad at all of it. I'm staying. A large red drop of sun lingered on the horizon and then dripped over and was gone, and the sky was brilliant over the spot where it had gone. And a torn cloud like a bloody rag hung over the spot of its going, and dusk crept over the sky from the eastern horizon, and darkness crept over the land from the east. The evening star flashed and glittered in the dusk. The gray cat sneaked away toward the open barn shed and passed inside like a shadow. Jode said, "Well, we ain't gonna walk no 8 miles to Uncle John's place tonight. My dogs is burned up. How's it if we go to your place, Muley? That's only about a mile." "Won't do no good." Muley seemed embarrassed. "My wife and the kids and her brother all took and went to California. There wasn't nothing to eat. They wasn't as mad as me, so they went. There wasn't nothing to eat here." The preacher stirred nervously. "You should have went too. You shouldn't have broke up the family." "I couldn't," said Muley Graves. "Something just wouldn't let me." "Well, by God, I'm hungry," said Jode. 4 solemn years I've been eating right on the minute. My gut is yelling bloody murder. What you gonna eat, Muley? How you been getting your dinner?" Muley said ashamedly, "For a while I ate frogs and squirrels and prairie dogs sometimes. Had to do it. But now I got some wire nooses on the tracks in the dry stream brush. Get rabbits and sometimes a prairie chicken. Skunks get caught and coons too." They reached down and picked up his sack. He reached down and picked up his sack, emptied it on the porch. 2 cottontails and a jackrabbit fell out and rolled over limply, soft and furry. "God almighty," said Jode. "It's more'n 4 years since I've et fresh killed meat." Casey picked up one of the cottontails and held it in his hand. "You sharing with us, Muley Graves?" he asked. Muley fidgeted in embarrassment. "I ain't got no choice in the matter." He stopped on the ungracious sound of his words. "That ain't like I mean it. That ain't. I mean," he stumbled, "what I mean, if a fella's got something to eat and another fella's hungry, why the first fella ain't got no choice. I mean, suppose I pick up my rabbits and go off somewheres and eat 'em. See?" "I see," said Casey. "I can see that. Muley sees something there, Tom. Muley's got a holt of something, and it's too big for him, and it's too big for me." Young Tom rubbed his hands together. "Who got a knife? Let's get at these here miserable rodents. Let's get at 'em." Muley reached in his pants pocket and produced a large horn-handled pocket knife. Tom Joad took it from him, opened the blade, and smelled it. He drove the blade again and again into the ground and smelled it again, wiped it on his trouser leg, and felt the edge with his thumb. Muley took a quart bottle of water out of his hip pocket and set it on the porch. "Go easy on that there water," he said. "That's all there is. This here well's filled in." Tom took up a rabbit in his hand. "One of you, go get some bale wire out of the barn. We'll make a fire with some of this broken plank from the house." He looked at the dead rabbit. "There ain't nothing so easy to get ready as a rabbit," he said. He lifted the skin of the back, slit it, put his fingers in the hole, and tore the skin off. It slipped off like a stocking, slipped off the body to the neck and off the legs to the paws. Jode picked up the knife again and cut off head and feet. He laid the skin down, slit the rabbit along the ribs, shook out the intestines onto the skin, and then threw the mess off into the cotton field. And the clean, muscled little body was ready. Jode cut off the legs and cut the meaty back into 2 pieces. He was picking up the second rabbit when Casey came back with a snarl of bale wire in his hand. "Now build up a fire and put some steaks up," said Jode. "Jesus Christ, I'm hungry for these here creatures." He cleaned and cut up the rest of the rabbits and strung them on the wire. Muley and Casey tore splintered boards from the wrecked house corner and started a fire, and they drove a stake into the ground on each side to hold the wire. Muley came back to Jode. "Look out for boils on that jackrabbit," he said. "I don't like to eat no jackrabbit with boils." He took a little cloth bag from his pocket and put it on the porch. Jode said, "The jack was clean as a whistle. Jesus God, you got salt too? By any chance you got some plates and a tent in your pocket?" He poured salt in his hand and sprinkled it over the pieces of rabbit strung on the wire. The fire leaped and threw shadows on the house, and the dry wood crackled and snapped. The sky was almost dark now, and the stars were out sharply. The gray cat came out of the barn shed and trotted meowing toward the fire, but nearly there it turned and went directly to one of the little piles of rabbit entrails on the ground. It chewed and swallowed, and the entrails hung from its mouth. Casey sat on the ground beside the fire, feeding it broken pieces of board, pushing the long boards in as the flame ate off their ends. The evening bats flashed into the firelight and out again. The cat crouched back and licked its lips and washed its face and whiskers. Jode held up his rabbit-laden wire between his two hands and walked to the fire. "Here, take one end, Muley. Wrap your end around that stake. That's good now. Let's tighten her up. We ought to wait till the fire's burned down, but I can't wait." He made the wire taut, then found a stick and slipped the pieces of meat along the wire until they were over the fire. And the flames licked up around the meat and hardened and glazed the surfaces. Jode sat down by the fire, but with his stick he moved and turned the rabbit so that it would not become sealed to the wire. "This here is a party," he said. "Salt Muley's got, and water and rabbits. I wish he got a pot of hominy in his pocket. That's all I wish." Muley said over the fire, "You fellas think I'm touched the way I live." "Touched nothing," said Jode. "If you're touched, I wished everybody was touched." Muley continued, "Well, sir, it's a funny thing. Something went and happened to me when they told me I had to get off the place. First I was going to go in and kill a whole flock of people. Then all my folks all went away out west, and I got wandering around, just walking around, never went far. Slept where I was. I was going to sleep here tonight. That's why I'd come. I'd tell myself I'm looking after things, so when all the folks come back, it'll be all right. But I know that wasn't true. There ain't nothing to look after. The folks ain't never coming back. I'm just wandering around like a damn old graveyard ghost." "Fella gets used to a place, it's hard to go," said Casey. "Fella gets used to a way of thinking, it's hard to leave. I ain't a preacher no more, but all the time I find I'm praying, not even thinking what I'm doing." Joe turned the pieces of meat over on the wire. The juice was dripping now, and every drop, as it fell in the fire, shot up a spurt of flame. The smooth surface of the meat was crinkled up and turning a faint brown. "Smell her," said Jode. "Jesus, look down and just smell her." Muley went on. like a damn old graveyard ghost. I've been going around the places where stuff happened. Like there's a place over by our 40 in a gully, they's a bush. Fust time I ever laid with a girl was there. Me 14 and stampin' and jerkin' and snortin' like a buck deer randy as a billy goat. So I went there and I laid down on the ground and I seen it all happen again. And there's the place down by the barn where Pa got gored to death by a bull. And his blood right in that ground, right now. Must be. Nobody never washed it out. And I put my hand on that ground where my own pa's blood is part of it. He paused uneasily. You fellas think I'm touched? Joe turned the meat and his eyes were inward. Casey's feet drawn up, stared into the fire. 15 feet back from the men, the fed cat was sitting, the long gray tail wrapped neatly around the front feet. A big owl shrieked as it went overhead, and the firelight showed its white underside and the spread of its wings. No, said Casey. You're lonely. But you ain't touched. Muley's tight little face was rigid. I put my hand right on the ground where that blood is still, and I seen my pa with a hole through his chest, and I felt him shiver up against me like he'd done, and I seen him kind of settle back and reach with his hands and his feet, and I seen his eyes all milky with hurt. And then he was still, and his eyes so clear looking up. And me, a little kid, sitting there, not crying nor nothing, just sitting there. He shook his head sharply. Joe turned the meat over and over. And I went in the room where Joe was born. Bed wasn't there, but it was the room. And all them things is true, but they're right in the place they happen. Joe come to life right there. He give a big old gasp, and then he let out a squawk. You could hear a mile, and his grandma standing there says, That's a daisy. That's a daisy, over and over. And her so proud, she bust 3 cups that night. Joe cleared his throat. Think we better eat her now. Let her get good and done. Good and brown, almost black, said Muley irritably. I want to talk. I ain't talked to nobody. If I'm touched, I'm touched. And that's the end of it. Like an old graveyard ghost, going to neighbors' houses in the night. Peters, Jacobs, Rance's, Joe's, and the houses all dark standing like miserable, ratty boxes. But they was good parties and dancing. And there was meetin's and shoutin' glory. There was weddin's, all in them houses. And then I'd want to go in town and kill folks, 'cause what they take when they tractored the folks off the land. What they get so their margin of profit was safe. They got Pa dying on the ground, and Joe yelling his first breath, and me jerking like a billy goat under a bush in the night. What'd they get? God knows the land ain't no good. Nobody been able to make a crop for years. But them sons of bitches at their desk, they just chopped folks in 2 for their margin of profit. They just cut 'em in 2. Place where folks live is them folks. They ain't whole. out lonely on the road in a piled up car. They ain't alive no more. Them sons of bitches killed 'em." And he was silent, his thin lips still moving, his chest still panting. He sat and looked down at his hands in the firelight. I ain't talked to nobody for a long time," he apologized softly. "I been sneaking around like an old graveyard ghost." Casey pushed the long boards into the fire, and the flames licked up around them and leaped up toward the meat again. The house crackled loudly as the cooler night air contracted the wood. Casey said quietly, "I gotta see them folks that's gone out on the road. I got a feelin' I got to see them. They gonna need help no preachin' can give 'em. Hope of heaven when their lives ain't lived. Holy Spirit, when their own spirit is downcast and sad. They gonna need help. They got to live before they can afford to die." Jode cried nervously, "Jesus Christ, let's eat this meat, for it's smaller than a cooked mouse. Look at her. Smell her." He leaped to his feet and slid the pieces of meat along the wire until they were clear of the fire. He took Muley's knife and sawed through a piece of meat until it was free of the wire. "Here's for the preacher," he said. "I told you, I ain't no preacher." "Well, here's for the man, then." He cut off another piece. "Here, Muley, if you ain't too goddamn upset to eat. This here's Jackrabbit. Tougher'n a bull bitch." He sat back and clamped his long teeth on the meat and tore out a great bite and chewed it. "Jesus Christ, hear her crunch." And he tore out another bite ravenously. Muley still sat regarding his meat. "Maybe I ought to talk like that," he said. "Fella should maybe keep stuff like that in his head." "Maybe I oughtn't to have talked like that." Casey looked over, his mouth full of rabbit. He chewed, and his muscled throat convulsed in swallowing. "Yes, you should talk," he said. "Sometimes a sad man can talk the sadness right out through his mouth. Sometimes a killin' man can talk the murder right out of his mouth and not do no murder. You done right. Don't you kill nobody if you can help it." And he bit out another hunk of rabbit. Jode tossed the bones in the fire and jumped up and cut more of the wire. Muley was eating slowly now, and his nervous little eyes went from one to the other of his companions. Jode ate scowling like an animal, and a ring of grease formed around his mouth. For a long time Muley looked at him almost timidly. He put down the hand that held the meat. "Tommy," he said. Jode looked up and did not stop gnawing the meat. "Yeah?" he said, around a mouthful. "Tommy, you ain't mad with me talking about killing people. You ain't huffy, Tom." "No," said Tom, "I ain't huffy. It's just something that happened." "Everybody knowed it was no fault of yours," said Muley. "Old man Turnbull said he was gonna get you when you come out. Says nobody can kill one of his boys. All the folks hereabouts talked him out of it, though." "We was drunk," Jode said softly. "Drunk at a dance. I don't know how she started. And then I felt that knife go in me, and that sobered me up. First thing I see is Herb coming for me again with his knife. They was this here shovel leaning against the schoolhouse, so I grabbed it and smacked him over the head. I never had nothing against Herb. He was a nice fella. Come a bullin' after my sister Ross O'Sharn, when he was a little fella. No, I liked Herb. Well, everybody told his pa that, and finally cooled, I'm down. Somebody says they's Hatfield blood on his mother's side in old Turnbull, and he's got to live up to it. I don't know about that. Him and his folks went on to California 6 months ago. Joe took the last of the rabbit from the wire and passed it around. He settled back and ate more slowly now, chewed evenly, and wiped the grease from his mouth with his sleeve. And his eyes, dark and half closed, brooded as he looked into the dying fire. Everybody going west, he said. I got me a parole to keep. Can't leave the state. Parole? Huey asked. I heard about them. How do they work? Well, I got out early, 3 years early. They stuff I gotta do, or they send me back in. Got to report ever so often. How's they treat you there in McAllister? My woman's cousin was in McAllister, and they give him hell. It ain't so bad, said Jude. Like every place else. They give you hell if you raise hell. You get along okay, unless some guard gets it in for you. Then you catch plenty of hell. I got along okay. Minded my own business, like any guy would. I learned to write nice as hell. Birds and stuff like that, too. Not just word written. My old man will be sore when he sees me whip out a bird in one stroke. Pa's gonna be mad when he sees me do that. He don't like no fancy stuff like that. He don't even like word writing. Kinda scares him, I guess. Every time Pa seen writing, somebody took something away from him. They didn't give you no beatin' or nothing like that? No, I just tended my own affairs. Course, you get goddamn good and sick of doing the same thing day after day for 4 years. If you done something you was ashamed of, you might think about that. But hell, if I seen Herb Turnbull coming for me with a knife right now, I'd squash him down with a shovel again. Anybody would, said Muley. The preacher stared into the fire, and his high forehead was white in the settling dark. The flash of little flames picked out the cords of his neck. His hands clasped about his knees, were busy pulling knuckles. Joe threw the last bones into the fire and licked his fingers, and then wiped them on his pants. He stood up and brought the bottle of water from the porch, took a sparing drink, and passed the bottle before he sat down again. He went on. The thing that give me the most trouble was it didn't make no sense. You don't look for no sense when lightning kills a cow or it comes up a flood. That's just the way things is. But when a bunch of men take and lock you up 4 years, it ought to have some meaning. Men is supposed to think things out. Here they put me in and keep me and feed me for 4 years. That ought to either make me so I won't do her again, or else punish me so I'll be afraid to do her again. He paused. But if Herb or anybody else come for me, I'd do her again. Do her before I could figure her out, especially if I was drunk. That sort of senselessness kind of worries a man. Muley observed. Judge says he give you a light sentence 'cause it wasn't all your fault, Jode said. They's a guy in McAllister, lifer. He studies all the time. He's secretary of the warden, writes the warden's letters and stuff like that. Well, he's one hell of a bright guy and reads law and all stuff like that. Well, I talked to him one time about her, 'cause he reads so much stuff, and he says it don't do no good to read books. Says he's read everything about prisons now, and in the old times, and he says she makes less sense to him now than she did before he starts reading. He says it's a thing that's started way to hell and gone back, and nobody seems to be able to stop her, and nobody got sense enough to change her. He says, for God's sake, don't read about her, because he says, for one thing, you'll just get messed up worse, and for another, you won't have no respect for the guys that work the governments. I ain't got a hell of a lot of respect for 'em now, said Muley. Only kind of government we got that leans on us fellas is the safe margin of profit. There's one thing that got me stumped, and that's Willie Freely's driving that cat and gonna be a straw boss on land his own folks used to farm. That worries me. I can see how a fellow might come from some other place and not know no better, but Willie belongs. Word me, so I went up to him and asked him. Right off, he got mad. I got 2 little kids, he says. I got a wife, and my wife's mother. Them people got to eat. Gets madder'n hell. First and only thing I got to think about is my own folks, he says. What happens to other folks is their lookout, he says. Seems like he's shamed, so he gets mad.